Is there a question downstairs? No? Okay, is there a question upstairs?
We can just have a bit of a snooze while they're getting there.
And we'll take the question upstairs first.
Okay, my question is for Jermaine. Whilst I take on board the added freedom that it would give to cover women, I wonder if you'd agree with me, nevertheless, that women's being covered up in other cultures is the result of men's oppression in terms of assured paternity from an evolutionary psychological point of view.
Evolutionary psychology is slightly problematic. I'm not a sociobiologist for very good reasons, I think. Now, let's think about this. You feel that women being covered up in cultures where they are covered up is because men have required it of them. Because what? Because they wanted to be assured of paternity. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, because from an evolutionary point of view, a man doesn't want to be cuckolded into bringing up children that aren't his. And if you go cross-culturally, you can see that 10% of all children are brought up by fathers who are not theirs, because the evolutionary stable strategy for a woman is to find the resources, but then maybe find the genes from another man. So if you cover your women up, then you can try to assure that paternity. So I always look upon women who are covered up as not being free, because this is men trying to keep them basically in the home and uneducated.
Well, the difficulty about a position like that is it doesn't really relate to behavior. You know, a guy trying to cop off with a girl tonight is not actually trying to transfer his genes. He really doesn't want to make her pregnant. He wants to have sex with her. He may not be smart enough to figure out how to prevent her from getting pregnant, or indeed to prevent her from getting human papillomavirus or anything else. It may be a way of describing the behavior of whole groups and races of people, but look, I am always worried about assumptions about lifestyles that take away all agency from women. Because before you've even begun to talk about what's going on, you've presumed that the women have no power and no influence in their own households, in their own lives. Now, there are plenty of people who would tell you that in a country like Egypt or the Sudan, say, a man who wants to leave an area, take his family to live somewhere else, has got to make sure that his wife and his wife's family are agreeable to the move. She has power in his family. Her mother has power. The family power is invested in women as well as in men. It simply isn't right to assume that the women themselves give no value to their covering. If I think of the Arab women I know, they will say to me things like, I am proud of my veil. It tells people who I am. It places me in my community. Like you, I would cry when I saw little girls trying to play wearing chador in Iran from the time they were really quite small. But I also knew that women who had been agricultural laborers before oil raised the standard of living in parts of Iran were very proud to assume chador because it hadn't been associated with laboring women. They were at last able to cover their faces. And in most of those communities, I nearly said all, but I'll say most, the men are just as clothed as the women. You don't have naked men in a Muslim country and dressed women. The clothing relates to the status of everybody involved. Every time I end up trying to explain the rationale of Islamic societies, I get myself into trouble and people accuse me of being in favor of honor killing and all sorts of madness. What I'm trying to say is this, that no social structure will outlive its own usefulness. And the usefulness of body covering in the Islamic world is still alive and well. And in fact, it's gaining strength from the implied contrast with the Western world, whose principal cultural export is pornography. And this is a simple reality, and I think we can expect fundamentalism to intensify as the rejection of the Western lifestyle becomes more universal in the Maghreb, in the Islamic world. But it's not fair to say that men veiled Muslim women. Their mothers veil Muslim women, and their mothers are people. They're not simple instruments.
Can I just say, though, that I think that, sorry to just jump in on the end there, but the desire to wear a chador, that comes out of a specific culture. The desire to wear disco pants comes out of a specific culture, some elements of which we agree with, some elements we don't, but they're both a result of the influences of culture on that person. I think it's perfectly possible to wear disco pants and say, this makes a statement about me. This is who I am. I'm proud of myself. Surely the bottom line is that it's all about choice and that no women should be judging other women no matter what they wear.
Is there a question downstairs now?
Hi. This question is for Jermaine. I just wondered, hearing you talk about attractiveness and sort of desirability, I wondered what you saw as the future. Will we become more extreme in what we desire of men and women, or do you think there will be a rebellion in terms of, you know, women wanting to cover up or to rebel against this view, perhaps in Western culture, of women being objectified?
Well, the thing about sexual culture is that it's extremely protean. It changes very fast, and it often changes to a form that contrasts with a form that it might still be being observed elsewhere. If you think back to when you were at school, how the schools differentiated from each other. We had schools where girls wore little weenie skirts, little pussy skimmer skirts. Then the school down the road would say, they're disgusting, and they would wear huge long skirts and generally stomp around the place looking extremely disapproving. There'd be schools where people had sex on the back seat of the school bus, and there'd be schools where that didn't happen at all and people defined themselves in a different way. All we know is none of these things is constant. Well, now that we've mentioned disco pants, I wouldn't mind betting that by tomorrow they'll be over. Because a 74-year-old woman has actually noticed that they exist. I think we've got to be aware that people are inventing ways of expressing themselves and ways of projecting themselves all the time. I've noticed something even on people's Twitter pages, that there used to be a whole lot of very sexy images. This is me in my bedroom pouting at the camera. I don't know whether somebody put the fear of pederasty into them, or it was Jimmy Savile's ghost, or what. But they've changed them. A lot of them have been changed into much more friendly and less sexually suggestive, because there's some evidence that the boys are finding the sexual pressure put on them by girls frightening, and they're responding to it badly by ignoring them, which boys are very good at, in my experience. So I think we can see everything happening, but what it takes is a leader. And what it takes in case of style is someone who has got enough flair to actually turn everybody on to a way of being. One of the things that I noticed about Tahrir Square is the fashion in wearing the veil in Tahrir Square, which became a really significant thing. It didn't help the women, by the way, because the reaction to the women who were active in Tahrir Square has been very bad, and they've been abused in pretty aggressive ways. But it's all happening, it's all up for grabs. I'm waiting for someone to say, this is what a woman looks like, not Miss World anymore. Give me a woman-shaped outline that young women can step into. Let our women grow up. I mean, one of the things that I said in The Female Eunuch all that long time ago was that women were infantilized. They weren't allowed to have body hair. They weren't allowed to have the bodies of grown-up people. They had to be like elongated children, and that is still the case. It's hard to imagine. How do we turn that over? How do we have a woman like Sophia Loren come back and be a role model for other women, a woman who actually has breasts, thighs, hips? There's no sign of her, I have to say, at this moment, but she could turn up just like that.
Natasha, do you want to come back on that question?
I think that something that I'm always, if you came to the pub with me, talking about is what I call the spectrum of beauty, something I call the spectrum of beauty. The fact is that there are women out there who do naturally have a body shape that is like Kate Moss. They're not a large number of them, but they do exist. And there's a big backlash, this horrible thing where people talk about real women. I mean, the last time I checked, skinny women weren't holograms. I think they're real as well. But people talking about real women all the time. There is room for everyone in the spectrum of beauty, no matter what your natural shape and size. And I think that we have to be very careful about talking about infantilizing women and skinny women and what they represent, because they're grown-ups too. They're no less womanly, the ones who naturally have that body shape. I think it's all about finding the right balance for you and being the best version of you, and that's what we're trying to do with Body Gossip, make it a bit more all-inclusive. There's no war here, you know. When I, because of my history, whenever I go and do a radio interview, they say to me, well, do you want everybody to be curvy? Of course I don't want everybody to be curvy. I just want everybody to be healthy and happy.
Is there a question upstairs? I can see 2 hands.
Hi, I'm just wondering if we're missing a point in relation to institutionalized sexism. It's all very well to be who you are, but ultimately, it doesn't help when we have people like the BBC who end up sacking women when they're over 40s because they look too old and too wrinkly on HD. So I'm just wondering how we can combat, or actually, it's about changing attitudes. And if it doesn't happen from the top, we have all these youngsters looking always at young presenters or young people on TV. Ultimately, we have Bruce, who's really old, in his 80s. He can barely talk more than 2 sentences. We're not sacking him, are we? So I'm just wondering, in terms of your opinion on how can we change attitudes? Both of you. Because you both look great.
You have a fantastic bone structure, by the way.
Harley Street, do you want the address?
Really don't, babes, but yeah, your choice. Well, in fact, one of the films that we've just made at Body Gossip is a film called Aging Gracefully, and it's written by a lady called Audrey Boss, who's 39. And she's talking about the experience of being in front of that wall of moisturizers in the supermarket, and they've all, in some way, promising that she will look younger if she uses them. And she talks about all the different things, double lifting dermo pumps and all these bits of, that we're not quite sure what it means, all these bits of wizardry. And she says, I'm 39 years old and I like my face and I don't want to look younger, I just want to be more moisturized. And why can't I find that? And so obviously, I'm going to say that the solution is getting, empowered older, I mean, 39 is not old, but older women out there who are actively proud of their wrinkles and are still beautiful.
I think you maybe understood. I think the women are proud, but they're being sacked by others because they are looking too old for TV.
Yeah, that's a
different
question.
story.
Ask Jermaine that one.
Okay.
Well, if you were to talk to any marketing organisation, you'd find out pretty quickly that you cannot advertise a product to an older consumer base by showing them the same age. Because older people don't want to look at older people. Older people want to identify with a different age, that they're not anymore, except that maybe when they're not looking in the mirror, they think they might really be that age. I mean, even Saga Holidays, I don't know if you remember, they had a mad ad where the old lady is sort of being whizzed off to Tenerife or somewhere by a whole gang of young people, and she's the life and soul of the party. Forget it, it's not going to happen. The reason why they don't put older women on as newsreaders or presenters is that they will get complaints from their viewers who don't want to see them, and that will include people of the same age as the presenter. Our problem is that we are gerontophobic. We don't want to see older people. We have the same problem. You know, my friend Claire Balding goes around gnashing her teeth because nobody puts women's sport on television. You know why? Because women don't go to watch it. Because we play the best women's football in the world and the arena is empty. There's nobody there. If we women went to watch women play, if we were as passionate about women doing things as men are passionate about their teams, then it would all change. But we're not. So we have to think that gerontophobia and misogyny are systemic in our culture, and rooting them out is going to be immensely hard work, and it's going to involve a real change in attitudes. It's all very well, you know, I can say to you, look at my lovely 74-year-old face, I'm lovely, but I don't expect you to agree with me, and I don't think I agree with myself. I have a strong temptation to get rid of this dewlap. It's really irritating, but it's part of my vanity. I mean, it's another kind of narcissism that says, this is my face, like it or lump it. I could have improved it and I didn't. To understand systemic misogyny in our society, to really try and work out how far it goes is tough. The misogyny that worries me is not men's, it's women's. We don't want to watch older women do things. We have got to like our old face and their old face, and not to think that we should have had work done. There is a very good BBC presenter who's just had the worst facelift. I saw her yesterday morning, and I screamed. She looked so peculiar. Poor, poor child, and she's very clever, and she was a very powerful presenter, and now with this strange mask, she looks like a mummy. She looks like a terrible parody of herself. This is a real problem that we have. Our lack of faith, not just in ourselves, but in each other, and we have to change it. But I don't have a magic way of doing it. I know that if I walk into a shop because I'm looking for something to wear, the sales staff think, oh God, don't let her buy anything of ours. We don't want her wearing our stuff because we've finished. They can't wait to see the back of you, and the fact that you've got the money to spend means nothing. They couldn't care less. They don't want to dress you, they don't want to see you. And this is the thing we have to change. No one's going to do it for us, especially not poor old George Entwistle or even Tony Hall. We've got to do it. But I don't have the vision to see how.
We have time for one final question. In fairness, I'll take it from downstairs if there is anyone. Final chance.
This is for Natasha.
Where are you?
I'm here.
Oh, hi. Hello.
I was just wondering what you thought could be done to tackle airbrushing, and why it is that all other forms of false advertising would be punished and immediately taken off air, but yet airbrushing is a norm still?
Yes, well, the problem with airbrushing, there's the most brilliant video made by Dove, sorry, called Evolution. And the reason that I love that video so much is because it shows you the way things are airbrushed that you wouldn't necessarily expect. Most people's understanding of airbrushing is, oh, they get rid of wrinkles and spots and they might make people a little bit thinner. But there's all these things that go on that you could never anticipate. Like, for example, the lengthening and slimming down of someone's neck. No one ever looks at a picture in a magazine and goes, I wonder if they've lengthened her neck. So my solution to airbrushing, because the Girl Guides came up with an idea whereby every single picture that had been airbrushed would have a stamp on it that would say this has been airbrushed, which I don't think would work, because I think most people have an awareness that most things have been airbrushed, and yet we still have a kind of emotional reaction to the picture. It doesn't matter how intelligent you are, there's still a part of your brain going, why don't I look like that? So my solution to airbrushing is to have all the things they've done, every single way it's been airbrushed, listed on the picture, because I think that that's the only way we'll ever conquer it. If you are genuinely aware of the fact, you know, they've filled in the gaps in their hair, they've made their eyebrows lower down their face, you know, they've made their legs twice the length they should be, and then, only then, can you see how ridiculous it is. But it's a brilliant question. I don't know why it's allowed to go on to the extent that it is, and that's one of the things that the All Parties Parliamentary Group on Body Image are trying to tackle at the moment.
I hope you join me again finally just to thank both our speakers, and also to remind you that our next talk is on the 28th of February next year, when we'll have Professor Robin Dunbar come to talk about what makes us human, what makes us special about being human.